Okay, so Darshan, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today, and to the students at the University of Waterloo. You have rich experience and knowledge that I know is going to be very valuable to them. But I wanted to start by just asking you to talk about your career. It does have extensive experience, especially working with organizations on their operational development. So, if I can just ask you to describe that and the work that you do today.
Sure, thanks, Peter. Well, let's see. I've been probably working longer than I was in school now, so it kind of tells you a little bit about where I am at my stage in my life and in my career. After business school at McGill, I guess my upbringing, my tutelage in business was what is now Nestle. Nestle consolidated the industry back in the 90s or late 90s. And in the division that I was in, which was primarily, we were in the cheese business, and we were also in the frozen products business. So things like your Seal Test ice cream, Parlor ice cream, those are some of the brands that I worked on. So I was a kid fresh out of business school, had never really worked before except at summer jobs. And my learning was for the first 7 years at Nestle. And, that I still have vivid memories of those days, and the kind of work that I'm still doing, really I can trace back to my early days at Nestle, where I went through a round of everything from marketing. I spent a couple years in finance, spent a year and a half in IT, did operations and logistics. I got a really good flavor. I visited our production plants throughout the country. I certainly worked with all the HQ folks in Toronto. And it gave me that really good grounding of what it is to be a manufacturing business with all its incumbent parts. I moved on from there to CIBC, and I had no clue what is banking. It's like, well, what's their product? What do they make? My whole world was, I was filtering it through a manufacturing lens. And interestingly, at CIBC, one of the things that they were looking to do was to understand product profitability. In other words, look at products, even though it was a checking account or a mortgage or a term loan or a mutual fund. These are products. So products have to have cost of operating, R&D on them, profit margins, and so on. And so they were looking for that, and I just happened to be there at the right time at the right place and spent a few years doing that. From there, I really moved into consulting, and for the past 20 years, since the year 2000, I've been in different forms of consulting, always with an operations focus. And whether that's been at Experian, where I worked with when I was actually living in Pennsylvania for 5 years, working with hundreds and hundreds of banks, which used Experian's small loan portfolio software, looking at what they were doing, how they were doing it, what the processes were. And from there, basically saying that technology, in the last 10 years, it's been about technology where you have an understanding of what the process is. And usually things like Lean and Kaizen and the Toyota production model, which we all now know for the last 30 plus years. But really, there's been a big shift in the last 10 years where all those things are still good, but they do take time. They take time to analyze, to have a Kaizen event, to do your Six Sigma style understanding. Where technology tools are much faster, have sometimes higher payback, if not the same, and you can deploy them with great ease. So that's been where I've seen the shift, and I know the work that I'm doing today is less about process re-engineering and say, you know what, yeah, your process isn't the greatest, by the time we figure out what your process is, where perhaps there's bottlenecks, where it's broken, we could just keep your process the way it is and automate it. You're going to get a X degree of acceleration in it without having to spend months and months trying to do all these changes. So from an operations perspective, it's been fascinating, Peter, to see the last 20 years. Ops has been about again, whether you credit Toyota or GE, these influential companies to say, we're going to really look at, the 6 degrees of defect control. All those principles are still valid, but I don't see people practicing them very much. Technology has disrupted operations re-engineering because we just don't have the time, the patience. People expect things done just tomorrow. And technology, luckily, is doing that. We now call some of these technologies really taking the robot out of the human. So you probably heard that, I'm a 9-to-5er, I go in, I do my job, I leave, I live for the weekend. You have a lot of workers, whether they're in manufacturing or in the services industry, and hey, I get paid, I just do my stuff. The stuff that they do that they don't really have to think much about, we are now questioning all of these things. Because if they're mundane, repeatable processes, that they're following business rules, wait a minute, why do we have people who can do a lot more cognitive, judgment-based decision-making, basically following an if statement? If the loan is over 10,000, kick it up to the supervisor, not my concern. If it's under 10,000, is the credit score valid? Yes, yes, no, yes, great, approved. Well, guess what? If that's what I have a person doing, I can actually have software doing it. And we get it done faster. So you've heard of these commercials. Hey, call us or apply online, and within an hour we approve your mortgage or your loan or your car lease. Unheard of. 20 years ago, you had to go to a branch of a bank or see a loan officer. You don't do any of that anymore. So, and guess what? Now, one side of me says, well, I'm sad about the person perhaps getting displaced. But the consumer side of me says, oh my God, I'm not going to wait weeks and weeks to see if my loan gets approved. I can get the answer right now. So we are, as a consumer society, instant gratification, instant appreciation, response. And so that's the cycle that I'm finding. So operations is just moving more and more towards that.
I'm fascinated by how fluently you can talk about both service and manufacturing operations. You switch from one to the other very quickly. It's almost like watching someone switch from one language to another fluently. And it's very interesting because most people, I think, don't have that level of fluency on both sides. But so your experience is in both. And because of that experience, I'm interested to know how you see the differences in managing those. How would you describe those for someone who's new to operations?
So, no, that's a great point that you make. So I'll go back to my experience at Nestle, where we had production plants where we would have these giant tanker trucks of milk come in. You've seen them; they're nice, gleaming. They have to be fantastically clean. You don't want your milk in a dirty truck. They would come in, they would discharge, and they would be collecting things from the farms. They would come into our plants to discharge. That milk would be going into the various vats, pasteurized. And from there, we would make the various products, whether it was yogurts or cheese or it was ice cream products and so on. So manufacturing it's a ballet of managing your machinery and fixed assets, making sure that they're not idle. There's a huge expense to them. There's maintenance and upkeep. So operations for manufacturing is just as much about understanding the process as it is maintaining your fixed assets, whether they be trucks, rolling stock, machinery, plants, the supplies and resources needed to make that plant functional. So you need engineers, you need repair folks, all of these things simply to keep fixed assets in top condition. I'll tell you, when it's a peak day in the summer, when we were in the ice cream, when I was in the ice cream division, and it's a 35-degree day, and your warehouses are just humming, and one line on the plant goes down because of some snafu somewhere, we are losing tons of production because, again, it's The moment it's produced, it's super cool, goes to a warehouse, and within hours is on a truck to a major grocery store or a restaurant. Guess what? You lose a few hours on the production line, and that ripples all the way through that supply chain, and then there's a shortage. And just when Loblaws says, hey, this weekend we have $1.99 special on parlor ice cream, and guess what? They're short. Nobody wants that. And they don't give rain checks. Services are different. There typically is none or very little fixed assets to manage. Services is all about, or 95%, it's about people. It's about people are your assets, and their skill sets, their knowledge, their uptime. Are they even in the office or in the warehouse, wherever they need to be? So the idea is, for services, understand the process. So the example I was giving you before about a loan or a mortgage, which most people can understand, I go apply, I provide various information, the loan officer will go check, there's a bunch of things, I get a letter or I get an email or a phone call, Darshan, you're approved, then I go back in, I sign off. It's all about a process. Managing that process, making sure it's done with good governance, making sure there's no things that fall through, having trained people to understand each component of the process, where the handoffs are. That is ops in a service environment. Understand the process. Is it as sharp as it can be, as efficient as it can be, that the idle time is managed well, the elapsed time is managed well. It's making sure all the people in that value chain are knowing their role, their job, what tools they have, and so on. Manufacturing is understanding the process, but the added complexity of managing the fixed resources that go into that process. In addition to people who obviously know how to operate that assembly line, people who can drive that 18-wheel rig, people who can deliver. So if you think of Amazon, they have massive technology in their warehouse that has to be humming all the time. They have their delivery fleet, but they also have the people. So I would say today, manufacturing has definitely continued to have that complexity. Services is, especially with technology, where people are less having to worry about, did I forget that step? Did I forget that step? The tools and the technology are doing it. So services are zooming farther ahead than the manufacturing world. Physical goods are being replaced in our economy with services. As you've probably seen, Netflix is a video streaming business. That's all they do. Yes, they probably have in the cloud a lot of servers so that they can store the copies that it can stream to you. But if you think of Blockbuster, which obviously they superseded, Blockbuster had to have thousands of physical stores, thousands of video cassettes and DVDs. You have to manage all of that, and the supply of those arriving by the truckload. Netflix, hey, I can just spin up a copy on a server anywhere. So I see the next 20 years, that asymptotic acceleration of services just continuing. I don't see a stop to this. I don't see manufacturing. I mean, obviously we need physical goods, but in terms of the economy, in terms of, again, where your students are at, in terms of looking at career choices in an ops world, it will be services. We still need to get product, let's say, from China over to the US on giant freighters. Absolutely, someone has to build these giant freighters. But in terms of where the excitement is, I think it's all going to be in the services side.
Okay, so you've hinted at some of the challenges that organizations are facing today. You've talked a little bit about technology. We're seeing a lot of these changes because of the rapid pace of technological change, as well as globalization. The virus has accelerated that probably in many areas. What do you see as the main challenges that the organizations are facing today, and how well are they responding to these challenges that they're facing?
I think I could probably name a whole bunch of challenges, everything from skill set, the right fit at the right time in the right place, to global political tensions. We have, again, China issues and so on. But I'm gonna skip all of those, Peter. I think the number one challenge that's going to stay for years to come, and again, important to your student audience, is disruption. That is the biggest threat of all, as a challenge to most companies operating today, is just absolute disruption of their business. And that's something you can't recover from, because if it hits you, it's too late. The other things, whether they be finding talented staff or having the right technology in place, or geopolitical issues, supply chain issues, those are not moving as quickly. They can be solved. It takes courage. It takes good executive leadership. But disruption, you don't even see it coming. And I'll give you some examples. COVID, which is the era we're living through right now. It's mid 2020. So COVID is very similar as a crisis to, let's say, what Y2K or the 2008 financial crises were. And what these challenges do is it gives rise to major disruption. So, for example, when Y2K happened and the dot-com issue back in 1999, 2000 or so, that disruption basically said companies that were agile and were software-based started to survive much better. The internet cemented its place as, it's not going away. This is not a fad. The internet really took on steam after Y2K. People started using email, and look what happened to the courier business for letters and so on. Email just disrupted that completely. 2008, the financial crisis. The disruption from there was the rise of companies like PayPal. Because, oh my God, am I going to go and now use a bank? When all these banks were basically just getting these mortgage-backed securities, packaging them up, selling them, and saying, hey, it doesn't matter. So the disruption, the disintermediation said, I don't think I want to use a bank anymore. I'm not, especially in the US. In Canada, we have a different situation. We have, the banks are all backed by the government. If not so, you have over 5,000 banks in the United States. And some amount of your assets are definitely covered, but most of after that, good luck. When banks folded, people said, what alternative do I have? And again, so PayPal and today Square, those are companies that are continuing to be taking the dominance. In fact, some are questioning, why do we need a bank? I can put my money into a lot of different things that doesn't pay me just 1% a year. So I think, that's going to be a challenge to the banks. Not anytime soon, but it's coming. Another, the disruption is causing mindsets to change. So organizations, people think, oh my God, what technology is going to replace it? I would say not only just the technological disruption, but consumer or customer mindset disruption. People were fine to order something in the old days and wait a week or two, and it gets delivered, because that's how long parcels took. Today, Peter, if I order something, I'm basically checking my mailbox or my front porch the next hour to say, Amazon, what's taking you so long? And usually I get it by end of day. So if I order it in the morning, they said, hey, if you order in the next, so many minutes, it'll be delivered in the next 2 hours, because my home is in a zone that they have 1 hour delivery. That consumer mindset is here to stay. We want companies to instantly do stuff. So that's a disruption. And if you're thinking, oh, well, don't worry, consumers don't want it, good luck. From an ops point of view, those of your students that are thinking, hey, I love ops, start thinking about disruption. How do I deliver whatever it is, service or product, in a very, very different kind of way than what the world is used to? I think that's going to be the next challenge coming up.
How does that change the job of an operations leader? This seems, very different to what they used to do before. In the past, they were managing relatively constant processes. There wasn't a lot of change. There was some, but nothing like what you're describing now. So what does this mean for the job of the operations leader today?
So in some ways, an ops leader, the role is timeless. Whether you go back to Henry Ford 100 years ago or today, an ops leader really the best way to understand his or her job is to understand what I call the value chain of delivery. What is it that you're delivering to your end client, customer, or sister company? So understand the value chain, but work backwards. Don't start from, okay, it comes from the mine, it gets processed, I get it into these globules, I'm a chemical manufacturer, I just produce these high-grade plastic balls, which I then go and deliver to. Work backwards. What is it that my customer expects of me to be the best company that they can buy from? So I have an understanding of your industry, and then say, what does my customer expect? Now, that's what they expect, and the metrics that go around it. In what time frame, with what service level agreement, in what shape or quality, at what price point. Now work backwards to say, how do I deliver that? What do I have today? What's my value chain today? And what do I need to do to meet these things? If you work backwards, you are starting from the point of view of your customer and keeping his or her absolute requirements in mind. So the job of a leader is to plot that value chain. And of course, not everybody knows everything. Get your people. Who's on your team? Who are the key sub-leaders in all of those components of the value chain? Get them, because they know the job way better than you. So if you're an ops leader, you can't know it all. Get that input from every single person on your team, right down to the front line. Once that value chain is there, get some alignment around, guys, do we all understand what it is our customer is expecting of us? Because ops is about execution. But you can't just execute, say, well, I did my job. I just passed the object from, the person who gave it to me. I did my little piece and I passed it on. Wait a minute, guys. If we're not all thinking what the customer wants, we're just doing our little piece. You could have done your piece, but the next person may have not done it. The next division may not have done it. And so the entire company suffers. So thinking of like a customer. I'll give you examples. Use Apple as an example. Everybody sort of has heard the Steve Jobs story. He is probably cited as the worst ops manager. Now, it wasn't his job, but he meddled in ops all the time. Because execution, for him, he didn't care what it took. He simply said, I need this done, and if you're not capable of doing it, I'll get someone else. And that was the mentality. Now, obviously, no one wants to have a boss like that. But what it did do was it just raised the expectations at Apple, whether it was delivering, the original Macintosh, whether it was the iPhone, or now they're doing all kinds of interesting things. So you take a look at Tesla. Elon Musk, fantastic leader, but that scaling for a company is the toughest thing that they can ever do. You may have a fantastic product, but if you can't scale, what scale? Scale is all about ops. It's about, I got the product, the customers love it, I've got the price, I know my value chain, I have to execute on operations. So Elon Musk says, guys, we've got to figure out how to scale. And what he did was, again, he set the bar extremely high. Folks, this is what we have to do. Are we all on board? Now, go do it. In other words, an ops leader has to have the ability to delegate and get out of the way. But you can't just delegate if you haven't set the target, if you haven't got buy-in and alignment from your team, because then everybody's doing their own thing. Guys, are we all on board? Yeah, literally, not to be corny, but you all put your hand and say, boss, everybody gets it. Great. Don't micromanage, get out of the way, have a check-in every so often. As your boss, what can I do? What resources do you need? But otherwise, have your team execute. That is really more and more the role of an ops leader. I think classically it's been shown, and it will be the only way you're going to get excellence in execution. And again, Tesla is a living example that people really, 2 years ago, are you kidding? Can you make 1 million cars from one factory in Fremont, California? They've opened 2 new factories in just a couple of years at a just phenomenal, it would take 2 years to have, a traditional automaker make a factory. These guys did it in months and had their first car out the door before people were even thinking it was possible. It's all about operations, execution, and again, it's just, were there moments of hell? Yes. Was Elon Musk apparently sleeping on the factory floor 24 hours a day? Yes. Were his key lieutenants doing the same? Absolutely. But that's what it takes, because we as a society expect that from companies now. We want great product at low cost, and if someone can deliver it, we are instant converts. Now you build such a moat around your business, who can compete with you, right? Netflix, Peter, the last time, I can't remember when I was waiting, the little circle of Netflix going, okay, I'm loading, oh, another 5 minutes, oh, no. Within seconds, it loads no matter what I watch. So you're used to instant delivery. And so companies need to be on the watch for that.
Okay. There are lots of technologies that organizations can use today. It's like for many, I think it's like having a menu when you go into a restaurant that is very large, where you have to make a decision on which technologies you are going to apply. How do organizations deal with that? How do they decide which technologies they should invest in? And what do you see as the most commonly used ones at the moment?
I'm going to take you down memory lane a little bit, Peter. Go back to the late 80s or early 90s when IBM was the only name really for large companies and operations. So IBM had their green terminals and basically the early aspects of what today we call ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning Systems. In fact, most people don't even know what ERP stands for anymore. It's just called ERP. That became the backbone of large integrated companies, where you had companies like IBM write the code to manage whether it was supplies coming in, whether it was Toyota's just in time, what was on the floor, what was in the warehouse, all of these things talking to each other. That was really the beginning of technology drastically improving the ops space. Because until the 70s or so on, it was really all just lots and lots of paper and in the early days, VisiCalc, maybe some folks trying to do it there, but really IBM started doing this stuff in the 70s, 80s. Now today we have companies like Oracle and SAP. Those are the two biggest names for operations in large companies. They basically own the vast majority of the market share. But aside from ERP, there are so many ancillary technologies that it's just mind-boggling. I'm going to just share my screen for a second and just sort of share with your audience what is out there these days. And there you go, if you can see my screen.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, so this is just something, what my company is involved in. We have in the automation space itself, there are things like process mining, optical character recognition, and now called intelligent document processing. We've all heard of the cloud, whether that's Google Cloud or Amazon Cloud. There's cybersecurity. There is natural language processing, digital assistance. Next time you call a call center, you may be interacting with a chatbot. There's, of course, companies like Oracle and SAP doing all kinds of CRM, business process management, robotic automation, data analytics and dashboarding, machine learning, and AI. You can just see, and this is just a small footprint of, my God, what companies have to figure out what it is that they're doing. It's like, should we get into this or this? So first you have these discussions to say, what the heck is this? And then you can see when you actually say, okay, I want to do business process management, I think it's going to be great. Well, then there's a whole bunch of players, each with its own bent on that technology. Which one do you choose? How do you choose it? The good thing is, look at all these companies in there, all saying, hey guys, I have a great product. It's very healthy to have good competition, you have innovation, all of these folks are trying to do process mining, each of them claiming to be the best. So that's fantastic. But now you're the poor ops manager having to choose between all of these. How do you do that? Do you go and attend a bunch of conferences? Do you read up on stuff? Now, don't forget, you have a day job. You have a life after work. How do you become the expert? And so that's where, again, the asymptotic acceleration of technology is outpacing, I think, the average ops manager's ability to comprehend just what is out there. And so what happens? Many companies are saying, I don't know what to do next. So they slow down. They're in fact now afraid of making decisions. So I just wanted to share that with you to say that that's really now the key challenge of companies is the technology landscape has exploded. Simply understanding what's out there is mind-boggling. When you do say, I want to get into this or this or this, then which company? Even if you write an RFP to say, hey, we're exploring this, how do you evaluate what's coming in? And that's where companies, whether they be similar to ours or the big four, typical large strategy consulting firms like McKinsey or Bain, they're being used by large brands to say, come and help us, guys. You know what? We want an objective opinion. Number one, we've already got the ERP in ops, but now should we look at automation? And where, give us use cases, give us case studies. Where have other competitors, industry leaders, what have they done? A lot of the stuff happens just like people, you know. If I see someone else doing it, maybe I'm going to try that too. And so sometimes if you're the first in the industry to move, people kind of wait and see, oh, hey, holy crap, that worked. Okay, great, let's do this too. So it's a little bit of catch up. And then it becomes, of course, everybody knows it's an industry standard. So what I find is that technologies today, right now in 2020, we're seeing, again, if ERP was from the 90s, it really cemented itself and is still there. The newer technologies that companies with major operations are adopting are definitely automation. Automation, both physical. When was the last time you saw any footage of a major automotive assembly plant without robots? Like, nobody is welding spot welds. I mean, if you found out as a consumer that the car was completely assembled by humans, I don't think you'd buy it. Rolls Royce aside, where I wouldn't trust humans to put a car together because the quality of a robot is just 99.99% accurate. So we are, again, as consumers now expecting that. So you've got automation, whether robotic or not. You would now have, I would say it's early days, you definitely have AI coming in. AI in all its forms. Cognitive. Imagine you could have a whole warehouse full of stuff. What do humans do? They can buy and they kind of scan the shelves. Yep, I can see that, I can see that, I can see that. Or you can rely on an ERP system, which may have some shrinkage built in. People are now using cameras mounted in warehouses, just like people's eyes, and they're counting the stuff instead of having to watch the forklift. They're just literally seeing what's in there and looking at the movement. So computer vision as a part of AI is becoming really important in manufacturing operations. It's just going to be fascinating the next few years of what technology does in an ops environment. Just fascinating.
Very interesting, and I was especially interested in that you're saying that organizations, really most of them, are likely to struggle to comprehend the range of options that is available to them or that are available to them. And they should look for help. And there are many places they can get that help. And you're one of them. I think it's worthy that you should be that should be recognized. But at the same time, that the need to seek help, to engage in relationships with others who are going to help you with this challenge is, I think, very solid and important advice. Many of them are not doing that, and it is important to tell them they should.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, let me just share one more quick screen with you. because sometimes we pray at the altar of technology, I think falsely sometimes. So while I'm a huge fan, and as I just mentioned to you, I think it's going to be super interesting over the next 10 years, I also sense that sometimes we get caught up too much in the technologies. Let me just share this with you a little bit. This is called the curve of accelerated expectations, where you probably have heard that there are definite components of our belief in things. This was put together by Gartner. And so, there's always things like a trigger, we have such expectations, and then, yeah, that didn't live up. Who was the dumb guy that thought of that idea? And then, well, you know what, maybe this thing does work. And finally, oh, of course it's accepted technology. When Henry Ford put an assembly line, people laughed at him and saying, are you kidding? It's like, that's not the way to put a car together. But today we are here because it's been done for 100 years. We know that it is the successful model. So if you take a look at a whole bunch of these technologies, each of these on various levels of this curve, for example, general artificial intelligence is right here. It's still being talked about that it's going to change the world. But look at the orange. The orange says, according to this was just published about a year or so ago, we're still 10 years away from general AI, the singularity moment that some people are calling it, where artificial intelligence will have enough of a level that you can't tell if it's a human or AI. We're still 10 years away from that. And we're still talking about, wow, it'll change the world. It will, but we're still far away from it. Quantum computing is another orange dot. It's now thinking it'll be able to do all kinds of stuff. We're still 10 years from that. This one I disagree with. Autonomous vehicles, I think, is not 10 years. I think we're probably in the 2 to 5 years frame, just from looking at companies like Tesla and Waymo and what they're doing and the tons of research that they've put in. On the other hand, things like, if I look at the stuff that's less than 2 years away, so robotic automation certainly is there. That's probably the nearest one. And then the whole bunch of things in the blue. So I just want to share that the technology, you have to be careful. You can't just say, oh yeah, I know technology is coming, it'll solve all my problems. Well, yeah, but it could be 10 years away. And in the meantime, you still have a business to run. Operation still needs to deliver. So by understanding where different things are, and how do you understand that? Look at what other companies in your field are doing. Talk to experts. Pay attention to the world. Go to some conferences. With the internet, there's so much data out there. If you're an ops leader, you can't wait for IT or head of innovation. Ops is you. You've got to have an understanding of what will impact your operation. And again, just be aware of what's out there. There's so much information that you can't just sort of have the blinders on and say, oh, well, don't worry. When the technology comes, I'll just wait for IT folks to tell me what to do. That's not going to make for an effective ops leader for sure. So just another interesting take on, technology is great, but don't rely on it 100% because it could be years away.
Absolutely, and a great chart. The application of the particular technologies to the chart, I think, is very interesting. And you could argue about what was where, but the idea that there is a chart of that nature, or that we should think about technology in that way, I think is very important. So assuming that we make a good selection of technology, we're then going to be looking to introducing it, and the cultural changes that will be required to be able to do that effectively. Could you talk a little bit about those and how organizations can, manage that effectively?
So let me take you back again 50 years or so. Getting a job, in my parents' generation was, if you got a job at a big company, a name brand company, again, whether it was IBM in the private sector or the post office or the postal service in the public sector, it was a job for life, right? That's your parents were quite happy if you got that job for life, because it meant security, it meant reputation, and so on. In that model, we had a number of things. One, you were told what to do, and all you had to do was do it. And as long as you didn't screw up, you didn't get fired. There was command and control. If you think back to IBM in the 60s and the 70s, Big Blue, you literally, I mean, I'd be fired for wearing, a non-blue navy blazer. You had conformity because you knew who your boss was, who knew his boss or her boss, and so on. We are no longer in that world and are moving faster away from that. The mantra today is innovation, not command and control. Flat hierarchies. Yes, you still need to have a CEO or a managing director because that's simply someone has to take responsibility legally and financially. But he or she don't know everything. We can't, as whether we're ops staff or we're just middle management or frontline employees, we can't wait to be told what to do. And that's what I'm seeing, that cultural change is really there. The heavy reliance about top-down management in the old day is fading fast. If you are, as an employee at any level, are just simply saying, yep, my boss will tell me what I have to do, not good enough. Your company, if that's the approach and philosophy they follow, will fade because people will simply take over. So again, I go back to disruption. One element of disruption is innovation. Innovation is not a monopoly in one person's head. I may be a frontline staff person, but because I do this job every day, I probably have thoughts on this. I probably know that simply if I do it this way, I'd be better. But hey, no one told me to do it. I don't think I have the permission to do it. I can't change the process, so I'm not even going to voice my opinion. The most disruptive companies today they're being disrupted because they're tapping in to everybody in the organization saying, guys, what is our goal? Again, what does the customer want of us? How do we get that to them in the fastest, lowest cost effective way possible? And by tapping in, that's really big. So how do you transition from command and control, yep, I just got to keep the supply chain running, I just do my job, to, again, introducing things? Because some people will be uncomfortable. It's like, I've been here 20 years. I do this job. I am really good at it. Now you're asking me to be innovative, think. So two things are going to happen. Either you're going to introduce a change management approach and you will bring some people along, or some people will self-select out because it's just not what they were looking to do. And that's fine as well. I just want to again share very quickly, just for a moment, a change management framework that I think is really important. So if you look at managing change, you have to identify, first of all the stakeholders. If you don't know who the stakeholders are, that's job one. Who is impacted? It's not just the staff. Think about customers are impacted when you are trying to manage change. When Netflix was going from the DVD in the mailbox to say, hey, you can get a DVD in 1 or 2 days, to going to streaming, guess what? They talked to internal folks how to do it, but what they didn't think about was customers. They just assumed customers wanted it now. There were customers who say, whoa, I kind of like the anticipation of opening my mailbox and having this nice little cardboard for Netflix and my DVDs waiting. I like the anticipation. You didn't ask me. I just now press the button and it just starts. You didn't ask me. And so they had to keep the DVD business going just because there was a small segment of customers that said, you didn't ask me. They didn't manage that change very well. So these are some of the typical suspects in stakeholders, of course. We then have, again, managing change. Oh yeah, no problem. Just let people know. Okay, fine. Yeah, there's communication. But do we know what the change is? Have we understood it from all aspects? Have we really defined it? You can't communicate something that you don't understand. When you communicate it, you can't just send a memo or the email saying, hey guys, starting next week, we're going to be doing things different. You have to have some sense of embedding it, some kind of reinforcement that is there. So depending on the order that you go in, you have to even start preparing that well before. So preparing means going to the stakeholders, making sure you've defined it, you now communicate it, and then perhaps as a final stage is make sure that it's starting to get embedded. You have influencers within every organization, making sure that you embed it. So those are the communications, the engagement, training, all of that stuff. Managing change, it's not complex It's just, you've got to think through things and keep everybody, with you. So that's where, if you don't do it well, you're going to lose some key stakeholders, whether your employees, whether your customers. It's really, really important that change is managed, especially when we're talking about ops, which is critical, when we're talking about technology, which is typically the largest change that we're seeing these days. It is all about managing that change.
Absolutely, and part of your job is to help organizations manage that type of change. I'm interested in uh, what you do that makes your consulting effective. How do consultants ensure that what they do is, providing the most benefit to the organizations they work with?
So consulting has been around, again, a long time. It probably started in the 50s, where you had experienced people saying, you know what, why just help one company like ours? We can help a whole bunch. And consulting was kind of born in the 50s. And today, your strategy companies are there. You've got your KPMG, Deloitte's doing more general consulting. And then you have boutiques and specialists, and there's thousands of them. Where our philosophy of consulting is, if the traditional approach is, you say, hey, Darshan, how should I do this? And I'm a consultant, so I'm going to tell you. And then I'll say, here's my invoice, right? Most often, consultants don't actually know the answers. What they do is they say, well, what do you think, Peter? How should you do it? And that's the old joke is, they'll ask 100 people in your company, and then they'll come up with a nice deck that says, here you go. And hey, that makes sense. Or they may add some market intelligence to it. What we try to do is we say, well, if you have an issue, if you have a concern, in our case, we focus on technology disruption and again, implementation of, let's say, robotic automation. We take you on a journey, and that journey is you. We call it client enablement. We're not here to tell you the answer. We're here to help you discover the answer yourself. It's all about knowledge transfer. So, Peter, you're teaching, hundreds and hundreds of engineering students at the University of Waterloo. They go through your class, they attend your sessions, they complete your assigned readings, and so on. Well, that's a journey you're taking them on. You can't just say, here you go, just do this and you're done. Or here's the answer. If you could get the answer to the exam, you may pass the exam, but your knowledge will be zero because you haven't gone through that journey of understanding the problem, trying to figure it out, making a few course corrections, failing a few times, and now you're succeeding. That is what will enable you to be a good engineer, to be a literate person. And also say, I studied that in Professor Carr's course. We went through this case study, and I learned it this way, and so on. That's part why we spend time learning. We do the same philosophy, except obviously in automation. So we'll have a 10-week program where someone says, hey, Darshan, I'd like to have robots in our company. We have a whole bunch of ideas where the robots can go. Can you do it for us? 99% of the companies will say, sure. What robots do you want built? Well, we have them ready. We'll build them. We'll have India do it, Philippines, all these hotspots around the world are building robots like crazy. Okay, great. I got my 10 robots built. A month goes by. 6 months go by. Hey, this is really good. Darshan, I need more robots. Great. I'll have more built for you. That's not helping because you're now not growing as an organization. This is not. Today, I'll give you the example of Microsoft Excel. I need a whole bunch of numbers added. An accountant will say, sure, I can do it for you. Here's the answer. Tomorrow, person comes back. What we'd rather do is teach you a tool called Microsoft Excel, show you very basic stuff. Here's some formula. You put your numbers in, you create an equal, you highlight it, there's your, amazing. We've now opened up that box of learning. And so client enablement is really one of our key ways. We pass on the best practices from hundreds and hundreds of clients. Guys, what do you think you should do? What are some of the issues in adopting new technology? By the way, here's 10 lessons learned and case studies to go with it. And by the way, we're happy to put you in touch with 5 other companies that have been on your trajectory 6 months ago, a year ago, or 2 years ago. Let's connect up. So we have a vast network. We're happy to put them together. Because sometimes if I tell you, that's a consultant telling you. But if I hear it from a peer in my own industry, that's pretty cool. And we're not part of that conversation. We just say, hey, Peter, let me introduce you to so-and-so. They had the same issue 6 months ago. I'm sure you'll find their story quite interesting. So those are some of the ways that we try to break away from traditional consulting, which is, here's the answer, it's really expensive and only we can do it and we're the experts. No. Look, we've been doing this for a while. Maybe that makes us an expert, but not really. We do know how to teach, though. We know technology. We know if you go too fast, you're going to go down, you'll lose your confidence, and you'll never build another robot. You'll never automate another process. We don't want that to happen. So we'll teach you the best way. We'll teach you how to avoid some common traps. And now you've got some confidence. You're now certified in particular technology. And yet, best of all, you did it yourself. And now you're enabled. So we've just taken the old adage of, give a man a fish, he's happy for a day. Teach a man a fish, happy for a life. It's the same story. We just do it for technology. And that really is appreciated by most of our clients. And we do stand out for that.
Yeah, that story about the fish was going through my head as I was listening to you speaking there. It's quite funny. But I was also thinking that what you're doing is more like coaching, where you're helping people achieve an objective in the short term, and at the same time, you're providing them with skills to be able to do things in the future themselves, and which is, I guess, what a coach does, and it sounds like what you do.
And it's not a one-time thing, just like I'm sure, Peter, you have students from 5 years ago that may send you an email saying, hey, Prof, how are you doing and stuff. Well, by the way, guess where I am? And you trade stories, you keep tabs. I mean, it's always refreshing to hear back from students, right? Occasionally, these same students will say, Professor, what advanced level would you suggest I do? I'm looking at these options. We do very much the same. We stay in touch with our clients, every quarter, sometimes once a year, saying, hey, glad to see you're doing this, and so on. By the way, here's where the technology is at now. It's now at this more advanced level. If you're interested and you think that you're there, we'd love to show you this. So whether it's a new learning program, or why don't you get in touch with some other customers who have done something like this? So the same way, that learning journey really never stops. And again, we like to play your role in teaching up-and-coming engineering students. We like to play that for up-and-coming automation companies to say, I'm scared of automation. How should I do it? Those are our best clients because they're open-minded, and it's far, far more cost-effective to learn once than to keep paying again and again and again, and especially for technology that you'll always be afraid of. What happens if the robot doesn't work? What if my machine that keeps going like this breaks? Will you be around? Well, guys, there's no secret. Here's how you fix it. So that is, again, the future, whether it's operations or just business in general, is, look, I 100% believe in core competency. A bank is not necessarily a mining company. They need computers. They shouldn't go and manufacture their own. Vertical integration doesn't mean that everybody does everything on their own. No, you clearly rely on competitive advantage. But some things are definitely in-house. We think some of the areas in ops, using some of those ancillary technologies, you can learn it. Again, Microsoft Office 365 example, we all are now secretaries in the old days, word processing. We all write our own emails. Peter, you and I come from an age where actually secretaries back in the early 80s still, you'd handwrite some chicken scratch, give it to them, they would type it, you would approve it, they would make lots of copies, and they would send it by courier to all the production plants. I know, I did that. Yep. We didn't even have voicemail. I would have a little pink slip in my little hole as I would pass by my assistant's desk, because she looked after our entire section on the floor. Oh, there's a message from me. So-and-so called. We didn't even have voicemail. We've come from that to now everybody is personally productive. And so adding the next layer, which what we do is, again, robotic automation, we think it's just that same forward step on that same curve.
Absolutely. And, one of the rewarding parts, I think, of both of our jobs is to see the progress that people make and the success that they have that we've been able to play a part in to help them along that journey, if you like. And that's a good part of the job. It's something that makes it worthwhile. As we're considering this, though, how successful are organizations at major change? We hear that many struggle with it. And so I'm keen to know the advice that you would give organizational leaders on how they could manage change more effectively based on all the organizations you've worked with.
So a little bit similar to that slide that I shared earlier, start with transparency. Question is, why change? Hey boss, it ain't broken. Why do we have to change? And often you would think that, duh, it's obvious, but no, it's not. So whoever starts that argument to say, let's change, he or she first, no matter what level, it could be an employee-driven change request. It could be a management, upper management change request. Doesn't matter who it is. Be transparent about the why. What are your facts? Because too much change is hugely disruptive to the organization. Constant change is disruptive. Measured change is very successful. So start with transparency on the why. Next, gain alignment. Because if people don't believe you or don't buy the why, Simon Sinek, I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, and he says, again, it's all about the why. Lots of people know how to do the how and the what, but it's the why. Why do we want to do this? If you can't get people to rally around the why, problem one right there. Because you haven't figured it out enough that people are going to say, yeah. So once you get the why and you get people aligned, then it's about as many stakeholders as you can identify and get them on board. So whether it's your traditional corporate functions, your marketing, communication, sales, logistics, finance, or it's downstream, it's your frontline folks in supply chain, whoever is impacted by this change, get them, make sure that they are all understanding the impacts of this change and that they are putting their hand up saying, yep, I get it. Make sure that they have input into what this change is, how it's going to impact them, what's the messaging. And I'm not talking about political spin messaging, just saying, guys, we have to do this. This is the right thing to do. Our industry has moved forward. We're now behind. This change has to come in. We're going to be adopting this technology. We're going to be changing this process. We're going to be shifting this gear, whatever it is. Here's how we understand the impacts are going to be to you or to our division and so on. Please come for an open air session, and maybe there's things we haven't considered. We're here to answer all your questions. So again, all about transparency, good communication. After you've gotten all that and people are on board, it's about execution. You can't do it overnight. Depending on the magnitude of change, it has to be done in pieces. It's the old frog in the boiling pot of water. If it's too hot, he's jumping right out. Do it slowly, and you get compliance, you get understanding, you get buy-in, because they're part of this, they're living through this. Imagine just when COVID first hit, and we were the first 2 weeks, when after lockdown happened in Ontario, oh my God, we were dazed. We were just, where's the world going? But as we got used to the restrictions, the lockdown, the social distancing, today, in fact, it's like, yeah, what's the big deal? I put the mask on whenever I have to go outside or I'm on the subway. We are now acclimatized. Now, no one kind of orchestrated this. In hindsight, if the governments had done it a little bit better, we would probably be prepared for where we are today. But if you're a company, you know where you're trying to get to. So again, just transparency, the why, the execution has to be measured. And then at some point, you've got to declare, guys, we're here. Mission accomplished. This change is now part of our everyday fabric. We are here. This is the new normal. At some point, we as a society, back to COVID, we're looking to say, when is it that we're here? Stage 3, for example, right? So managing change, not rocket science for sure, but so many companies screw it up quite badly when it just needs a simple approach. but you got to think through it.
Absolutely. So I just got one more question. Many of the people who are watching this will be considering careers in an operations environment. What are the skills that you think that they will that will be most important to them, and what advice would you have on a successful operations career?
Yeah, great question. I think, first of all, personally, having been in ops, and even now with technology, but it still revolves around ops, I think it's a fascinating place to be. Far more than I would think people want to go into marketing or finance, more traditional fields in some way. I think ops and execution of your product or service, whatever it is really where the world is at. So companies like Amazon have changed the world, how we expect delivery, how we expect to get low prices, and so on. How did Amazon do that? All about ops and about execution. So if you're thinking about a career to be successful, number one advice, stop thinking linearly. Linear supply chains will not work in the future. They're not working today. You can't go from A to B to C to D. People are trying to figure out how to go to A to D and skip 2 steps as they're going through it. So if you are thinking, hey, I think I'm going to be a great ops manager, I'm really detail oriented. So boss, just tell me what to do and I will make sure every detail is covered. Problem 2, details are good. Don't wait for the boss to tell you. If you want a successful ops career, you want to rise in the ranks in ops, don't wait for someone. You are the one managing your team, let's say. You've got to come up with that disruptive change. You go sell it upstream to say, my team wants to do this. That is going to make for a successful career. Third, customer mindset. Who is your customer? Is it the downstream team that you're going to supply it to? Is it the end consumer or client? Is it a sister division of your company? What would they say about what you're and your team doing? In other words, what are they expecting? So, yeah, but that's my job. Well, no, your job is ultimately about what the customer wants, whoever your customer is. Think like a customer. I know you're in ops, you're not marketing. No, it's about what the customer wants. Whether it's quality, it's about timeliness, it's about cost-effective product, and so on. Fourth is successful operations careers these days are going to be all about disruptive change. Whether that's technology or it's simply just saying, we don't need to do steps B and C, we're just going to go straight to D. Like, we just don't need to do it. Again, Netflix just said, guys, we're just going to stop the DVDs. I know some of you love them. We're just going to stop. You have to take that courage, take that risk to say, we're just going to be a streaming company from now on. You may lose a bit of the audience, but you have to be bold and forward thinking to say, we are going to be this kind of company. And that was hugely disruptive at the time. And the fifth item I would mention is really have a technology mindset. Technology, if anything, in the last 40 years has shown us is not going away. There is no going back. Technology will drive operations. And so if you're in engineering, yep, all the classic engineering things you still have to know, but technology more and more will be what drives operations. Whether it was Henry Ford introducing the technology of assembly lines, whether it was Tesla having 90% of their entire automotive assembly line done by robots, or it's SpaceX simply saying, guys, why is internet having to be delivered through a hard line or through a cell tower? We're going to launch Starlink. We're going to have 10,000 satellites in low Earth orbit, and we're going to cover the entire planet with high-grade Wi-Fi, whether you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or in the Sahara Desert. Why would people even think that? There's nobody in the Sahara Desert. Doesn't matter. We are going to change the way we deliver the internet. And that is really that fifth element of operations, which is just completely disruptive technology mindset. So if any of those appeals to your students, they have a great career in ops ahead of them. But they have to be really passionate about some of these items that I just mentioned. If they're thinking of, yeah, just tell me what to do, I don't want change. I just want a job for life. Guys, if you're watching Professor Card's video right now, just say, Prof, thanks, I'm going to drop out of your course, because that's not the future.
Great advice, and a very valuable interview. Thank you, Darshan. I really appreciate you making the time to do it.
Oh, my pleasure, Professor. Anytime. I really enjoyed speaking with you.